Your mind isn't repeating the same thoughts by accident. There's a reason it won't let go, and once you understand it, everything about how you think begins to change. Most people believe that repetitive thoughts end when a problem is solved, but the brain doesn't work that way. Your mind doesn't replay memories, conversations, or worries. Because it wants answers, it replays them. Because it wants emotional closure. Emotional resolution is the moment when the brain finally understands one thing clearly. This experience is no longer a threat. Until that signal is received, the brain keeps looping. When something emotionally intense happens, rejection, embarrassment, fear, regret, loss, the logical part of the mind may move on, but the emotional system does not. The brain stores emotional experiences differently. It doesn't ask, "Did this make sense?" It asks, "Am I safe now?" If the answer is unclear, the loop begins. This is why your mind replays the same thought again and again, even when you already understand it logically. You might say to yourself, "It's over," or "I shouldn't care anymore," but the brain ignores words. It listens to emotional signals, and when emotions are suppressed, rushed, or ignored, the brain treats the experience as unfinished business. Repetitive thinking is not a flaw, it's the brain's attempt to finish what was emotionally interrupted. The mind revisits moments not to torture you, but to process what wasn't fully felt, acknowledged, or integrated at the time. Every replay is the brain checking, "Have we resolved this yet?" Emotional resolution doesn't mean forgiveness. It doesn't mean approval. It doesn't mean forgetting. It simply means allowing the emotion to be recognized without resistance. The moment an emotion is fully felt and understood, the brain begins to stand down. The nervous system shifts. The urgency fades. The loop weakens. This is why distraction rarely works long-term. You can silence the thought temporarily, but unless emotional resolution happens, the brain will bring it back, sometimes louder, sometimes quieter, but always persistent. When people say, "I don't know why this still bothers me," the answer is simple: because emotionally it was never completed. Once the brain senses emotional safety, it no longer needs to repeat the signal. The thought loses its charge. It stops demanding attention, and only then does the mind allow itself to move forward. This is where the mental loop truly begins to loosen, not with answers, but with emotional resolution. When emotions don't reach closure, the brain creates something even harder to live with: uncertainty. The human mind is wired to hate unanswered questions, not pain, not stress, but not knowing. When something is unclear why someone changed, whether a decision was right, what something really meant, the brain refuses to move on. It keeps returning to the same moment, hoping that this time it will discover the missing answer. This is why your mind replays the same thoughts again and again. The brain believes repetition leads to clarity, but uncertainty doesn't resolve through repetition, it deepens. Every replay adds new interpretations, new doubts, new what-ifs. Instead of closing the loop, the mind stretches it further. And because point one left emotions unresolved, uncertainty now has space to grow. Here's the key truth most people miss. The brain treats uncertainty as a threat. From an evolutionary perspective, unclear situations meant danger. So when something feels unfinished, the brain stays alert. Overthinking isn't a flaw, it's the mind trying to protect you by staying prepared. That's why telling yourself, "Just stop thinking," never works. The brain won't let go until it feels safe, and safety requires clarity. So your thoughts don't repeat because you're weak. They repeat because your brain is still searching for certainty it never received. When a thought carries strong emotional intensity, the brain treats it as unfinished business. It doesn't matter whether the emotion is fear, regret, anger, or even hope. What matters is the strength of the feeling attached to it. The brain is wired to prioritize emotionally charged experiences because evolutionarily, emotions signaled survival or danger. So when an emotion spikes, the mind assumes, "This must be important, don't drop it." This is why emotionally intense thoughts keep resurfacing more than logical ones. Your brain isn't trying to torture you, it's trying to process the emotional weight fully. Until the emotion drops to a manageable level, the mind keeps replaying the memory, the conversation, or the imagined outcome, hoping repetition will reduce the intensity. This connects directly to uncertainty. When emotions are strong, uncertainty feels even more threatening. The brain mixes the two and creates a loop. Emotion fuels thought, thought fuels emotion. Over time, the mind learns that replaying feels safer than letting go, because letting go feels like losing control over the emotion itself. For deep thinkers, this effect is amplified. Emotional intensity doesn't fade quickly, it lingers, expands, and demands attention. The brain believes that staying mentally engaged will eventually neutralize the feeling. But without awareness, this survival mechanism quietly becomes overthinking. At its core, your brain is designed to protect you, not to make you peaceful. When a thought keeps returning, the brain often believes it is preventing emotional harm. From its perspective, revisiting a memory or scenario is a way to avoid repeating pain, embarrassment, or loss. Letting go feels risky because the mind associates forgetting with vulnerability. This protection system activates especially after emotionally intense experiences. Once strong emotion and uncertainty are involved, the brain switches into a defensive mode. It keeps the thought active as a reminder. Stay alert. Don't miss something important. What feels like mental exhaustion is actually the brain standing guard. Over time, this protective behavior becomes automatic. The mind starts replaying not to solve the problem, but to maintain control. It believes constant mental monitoring reduces danger, even if no real threat exists anymore. That's why the thought feels persistent. Your brain thinks it's helping you stay safe. This links directly with emotional intensity. The stronger the emotional impact, the stronger the protective response. The brain assumes that releasing the thought means lowering defenses. Without awareness, protection turns into pressure, and safety turns into mental noise. Once the brain enters protection mode, it often shifts into reflective thinking. This is when the mind starts analyzing past events, conversations, or decisions repeatedly, trying to extract meaning from them. Reflection itself is harmful. It's how humans learn. But when driven by emotional intensity and uncertainty, reflection becomes repetitive instead of insightful. The brain believes that by revisiting the experience again and again, it will uncover a missing detail that brings closure. Each replay feels purposeful, as if understanding one more layer will finally quiet the mind. But because emotional resolution was never reached, reflection keeps looping without a clear endpoint. This type of thinking is subtle. It doesn't feel like panic or fear. It feels thoughtful, even intelligent. That's why it's easy to mistake mental exhaustion for productivity. In reality, the brain is still protecting itself, using reflection as a tool to stay alert and avoid future emotional pain. Over time, reflective thinking reinforces the loop. The mind becomes trained to stay inward focused, scanning memories instead of engaging with the present. Without awareness, reflection stops being a bridge to clarity and becomes a cycle that quietly drains mental energy. As reflective thinking keeps the mind turned inward, another layer quietly strengthens the loop: lack of awareness. This doesn't mean ignorance or low intelligence. It means the brain is so busy thinking inside itself that it stops noticing what it's doing. The mind begins to treat its thoughts as facts instead of signal. Emotional intensity feels like truth. Repeated thoughts feel important simply because they repeat. Without awareness, the brain never pauses to ask, why am I thinking this again? Instead, it assumes there must be a reason and continues searching for answers that were never clearly defined. This is where mental loops become invisible. The brain believes it is solving a problem, but in reality, it is just replaying a pattern created by uncertainty and protection. Because awareness is missing, there is no interruption, no moment where the loop is recognized as a loop. Lack of awareness also disconnects the present from the past. The body may be safe, but the mind still reacts as if the emotional threat is ongoing. Until awareness returns, the brain cannot shift out of protection mode. It keeps repeating thoughts not because they are useful, but because no one is watching them closely enough to stop the cycle. Clarity is the moment the loop finally loosens its grip, not because the thoughts disappear, but because you understand them. After emotional intensity, brain protection, reflective thinking, and lack of awareness, clarity arrives as a shift not in your thoughts, but in your relationship with them. Clarity means recognizing that repetitive thoughts were never the enemy. They were signals that something needed attention, safety, or understanding. When awareness turns on, the brain no longer needs to shout. It no longer needs to repeat the same message in different forms. The loop fades because its job is done. This is where the mind exits survival mode. The nervous system senses resolution, not answers but acceptance. You stop chasing certainty and start grounding yourself in the present. The brain realizes it doesn't need to protect, replay, or overanalyze anymore. Clarity doesn't silence the mind by force. It softens it through understanding. You see patterns instead of problems. You notice emotions without drowning in them. Thoughts pass instead of sticking. And this is the truth most people never hear. Your brain was always trying to help you. Once clarity appears, the mind finally feels safe enough to let go. Not because you fought your thoughts, but because you listened. That's when thinking becomes quiet. That's when the loop ends. If your mind keeps returning to the same thoughts, it doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It means your brain has been trying to protect you, guide you, and make sense of something you haven't fully seen yet. Overthinking was never a weakness, it was unfinished awareness. The moment you stop fighting your thoughts and start understanding why they exist, the control shifts, not to silence, but to clarity. And clarity is what finally frees the mind. If this felt personal, that's because it was. Your brain wasn't attacking you, it was calling for attention. And once you hear it clearly, it no longer needs to repeat itself.